Well, guys, it's the home stretch. Spring break is over. Graduation is just a few weeks away, and then all the students leave campus. You hear the crickets? Because that's what it's going to sound like. So, is your property set to finish as strong as it can with pre-leasing? If your prospects have to complete a credit check to be approved, you are not set up to finish as strong as you can. I mean, think about it. How many student applicants who you know are completely able to make timely rent payments but are not being approved because of a parent's bankruptcy left over from the Great Recession? Or think about this. How many prospects are you missing out on even applying because they know their parents have a bankruptcy or a blemished credit report? But the student is still receiving financial aid and other sources of income that will cover their rent. If you don't want to throw these potentially great tenants out of your prospect pool, contact Leap Insurance. Leap is spelled L-E-A-P. But contact Leap Insurance today and ask about their institutional co-signing product. It's a rent guarantee program that allows your prospects to pay a small upfront fee to guarantee the landlord that in case of default, Leap will pay out the remaining rent, even if the tenant never moves in. Have you ever had that happen? I've had that happen. Even if a tenant never moves in, Leap will still pay out up to 3 months rent. So head on over to leapeasy.com and contact them today. Like right now, today. You don't have much time. There's only a few more weeks left until graduation. Well, today. Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees, and today I finally got one of our new co-hosts. I've been telling everybody that we've got new co-hosts that are coming on this year, and the co-host joining me today is Lincoln Ogata with Easy Turn. Lincoln, welcome back to the podcast.
I'm happy to be here. Happy to be your first co-host on here so far. That makes me excited.
Well, yeah, you were actually on the podcast back in the summer when we talked about, it was our turn episode, I guess is the best way to label it. And obviously you've got a lot of experience with that, but I wanted to make sure that, this next year we had some folks that were, covering a good portion of topics that they were familiar with and were experts in. And obviously, you've got a long history in student housing on the maintenance and facility side, so I wanted to make sure that we brought somebody in that could really relate and provide. So this is Student Housing Insight, so obviously you're much more qualified to provide insight on maintenance and facilities and even general construction with all of your years with the Navy on the construction side as well. So super stoked about having you join our team here. So thanks again for agreeing to do that.
No problem. Happy to be here. And
then we've also got a special guest co-host today, which is no stranger to the podcast or to Student Housing Insight. If you've kept up with some of the things we've been doing the past year, especially with our first summit that we had in Charlotte back in October, we have these idea presentations that we do at those summits. And Jackie Pingel has submitted an idea to me that we later labeled Legacy over Promotion. And Jackie's joining us today.
Hi, everybody.
Jackie is located in Chicago, so thanks for dialing in on this one, and we'll get into a little bit more why I wanted to make sure we had Jackie on this podcast. So, but really quick, I mentioned the Student Housing Insight Summit, regional summit that we did in Charlotte. We've got 4 more of those that are scheduled for 2019. The next one's actually coming up on May 14th. Which is for the markets in Florida and Southern Georgia. And so, we're doing this in partnership with Grace Hill and with Axiometrics. Later this year in June, we've got another one in Cincinnati, which is for more of the kind of Eastern Midwest states. And then we've got one in September for Texas and Oklahoma for the markets in those 2 states. And that's going to be in Waco, Texas. And then we'll have another one on October 1st back in Charlotte at the Whitewater Center. So looking forward to that. That'll be for the southeastern states. I should say southeastern, kind of mid-Atlantic states. But anyway, again, thanks for joining today, guys, and wanted to kind of put it back to to you, Lincoln, on this topic, which we're kind of labeling how to harmonize your maintenance and office teams on site. So talk to me a little bit about why this topic was important to you and about the guests that you wanted to bring on.
Yeah, so definitely. When you think about when I was given the task to think about some things to talk about first, as far as facilities goes, this really just came to mind because I feel like it's such a missed thing, and I feel like there's so much that can be benefited from having great harmony within a workplace. And I feel like some people think it's too large of a task, and instead of trying to work together, they try to come up with their own separate agendas, and you kind of have two people really steering the same ship with two different, rudders, if you will. And I really feel like I said, this is a very commonly missed point to work on. So when he mentioned that to me, I thought, if I could tell anybody any one thing, what would that be? And it really is to invest in that relationship and just to see the dividends it pays out when you're setting that proper example between a maintenance and office staff.
Yeah. Well, and the way that you guys kind of go through this interview when you're speaking with Corey, it's one, you could tell that there's obviously, kind of a kinship between you guys, and you guys have been through a few fires together for sure. And so that certainly comes through, but you guys really laid it down as kind of, not only are here some of the bigger things you need to think about as far as communication, but then you get into some more of the tactical things of just kind of tips and tricks, be it weekly meetings or having office staff kind of co-work with the maintenance staff. So we'll get into that, but talking about that kinship that certainly comes through with the interview with Corey. When I listened to it the second time, I thought, I've been somewhat at an advantage coming through the ranks from site level to C-suite. When I was at the site level, there's very few guys that come through this industry as a property manager. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but compared to the women in this industry, they end up staying on site much longer. That tends to be, who is in that position at most of these sites. And on the other side of it, you typically see men being in a maintenance position for a good portion of their life. And so there's that dynamic. And I was kind of in a fortunate position where, coming through as a male and going into that GM position, being able to talk with my maintenance supervisors, who throughout my career, I've only had one instance where my maintenance supervisor, and it wasn't a property that I directly managed, it was one that was in my portfolio. I've only had one woman that was a maintenance supervisor, and we could talk a little bit more about that later. But I thought, me listening to you and Corey speak, reminded me a lot of, the relationships that I had with my maintenance supervisors. And I thought, how I don't necessarily hear that so much, when I'm doing due diligence at different properties and doing things on the consulting side. I get a lot of feedback from managers and just a lot of general questions of, hey, how do I improve the communication? And this is from both sides, from both maintenance supervisors as well as from general managers, saying, look, there's this disconnect here. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the two different positions and what's required and how we are all kind of wired for, doing things that we like doing. And, some of that is more maintenance facility based and some of it is more office administrative based. So there's going to be those differences in personalities there. So I really wanted to reach out to Jackie and, get some feedback as well, get her perspective, because what I really felt like was no matter what the dynamic was from a gender standpoint of your office and maintenance leadership, the things that you and Corey, put out there as some, as tips and tricks and general communication guidelines, those are really consistent regardless, So anyway, Jackie.
Hi.
I definitely want to come back in the outro and let's kind of dissect a lot of these things. But generally, you've listened to the interview that we're about to play for everybody. From a female perspective, what's your take of that interview?
I thought that a lot of the topics that Lincoln and Corey talk about are applicable across the board. Those are experiences that every property manager and maintenance supervisor and truly property management leasing office and maintenance team are going to experience. I do think, though, that it's really interesting to consider it from the gender dynamic side. I think, as you've said, our maintenance supervisors tend to be older, maybe not a generation older than the property manager, but in many cases, maybe. And they also tend to be men in a heavily female-dominant industry. And so there is, of course, an undeniable gender dynamic. And I also think, not to get too far in the weeds here, but there's also some kind of level of, if not gender, then, and I'm not going to get my words right here, Wes, but the maintenance field tends to be a very masculine field. And so I think that some of these issues that women experience are going to be experienced by anybody who's not as masculine, maybe as our maintenance supervisors are, as the maintenance industry demands. So I think really these are experiences that are kind of across the board and then heightened if you're dealing with a female-male relationship or anybody who is not kind of your stereotypical maintenance position. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And, great point about, not just the gender differences, that weigh into this, but also with, the generational and the age differences, because, typically someone that ends up choosing maintenance as a career path, especially, let's face it, when you look at what happens beyond the property level, the positions that are on a corporate level or a regional management level that are facility and maintenance space are far fewer than what happens on the marketing and leasing and sales, as well as business development and all the other administrative and accounting roles that are out there. Because a lot of the smaller student housing companies that you will see out there don't even have anyone at a corporate level that came through the ranks on the facility side and is now in a corporate position focused solely on the facilities. So because of that, they've come through, that career path, and maintenance supervisor for, in a lot of their companies is kind of
the peak.
That's kind of, the top position that you can get without making some type of, huge jump into another company, possibly, somewhere else geographically, and make a lot of other sacrifices, within your life. So a lot of them choose to stay in that, in that position for an extended amount of time. So yeah, when you have that dynamic mixed with, and Jackie, you and I have, talked about this before, on the office side, the administrative and leasing side, there is a lot of turnover, and B, a lot of quick advancement. And because of that, you had a great illustration earlier. Why don't you mention that to everybody?
Yeah, I think, and if you attended the conference in Charlotte last fall, then we talked about this there. But I think that so many of us were really promoted very quickly. And as I said there, I became a property manager when I was in my mid-20s. And I think in hindsight, looking back, my management style is so different today. I think that we as property managers, if you've been doing this for a long time, you really mature into a management style that can fit all members of your team, whatever their role may be. And I think that if I had any advice for starting out property manager Jackie, I would have told her to maybe listen a little bit more and talk a little bit less. I think that was probably the biggest mistake I made early on, just in coming in with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, thinking, oh, I'm in charge here and everybody's going to do what I say. And over time, as I learned to really rely on the experience and expertise of members of my team, that makes me a better manager to know that my maintenance supervisors really are the experts in so many parts of my business, and that I have a lot to learn for them. And frankly, I'm a better manager today for having let them be the experts in the facilities part of the building.
Yeah, we get so hung up on, who's reporting to who. And that's a lot of that is, I think a lot of people deal with pride in that situation. If you're in, I go into a lot of these leasing offices and, I'll see an interaction between, a 22, 23-year-old female manager and, a maintenance supervisor will, come in to pick up some maintenance work orders or complete something on the computer or whatever. And, there's this, sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's belittling and not healthy, but there's this dynamic that happens where it's almost like, a grandfather and a granddaughter, right? And and in a lot of ways that could completely be the case. As far as, the age difference and everything else. And so, and like I said, sometimes that's really healthy, where you see the communication and the admiration for each other being, really on top of it, then, or being really great. And then sometimes you see it another way where that's not there. There's not an appreciation for each other. It's, the maintenance supervisor looking at it as to why am I reporting to someone that could be my granddaughter? And the other, on the other side of it, well, why will he not take what I'm saying seriously? And does he not understand that I'm the one that's in charge here? And that's just the wrong attitude to have. Like, you're not going to get anywhere until those fences come down.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely accurate. And I've been on both sides of that relationship. I was thinking about it and preparing for this conversation today. I was thinking about, I had a maintenance supervisor who was much older than me, the same, exactly what you're talking about, a grandfather-granddaughter relationship. And I mean, granted, this was early in my career, but something that we really struggled with. And there was an age gap and a generational gap and an expectation gap, which, did I do enough to overcome that expectation gap? I'm not sure. But, I will remember forever that the night he retired at his retirement party, he said, well, now I'm going to finally ask you for that kiss on the lips.
Wow.
And yeah, it's one of those so inappropriate, awkward things. And you've been working with this guy for a really long time and you respect the work that he does. And at the same time, in West, we could do a whole podcast on this, and most people, but we could do a whole podcast on being a woman in this industry. And I think your earlier point to women stay on site longer than men, and why is that? But it is
specifically on the office,
right? On the on-site side,
the administrative route, yeah.
So I think we do have to, as women in this industry, and so much of our work is rooted in, to Lincoln's point, turnover. And are we running successful turnovers? And how is our building being run and our vendors? And we rely so much on the external impact of our vendors and our maintenance team. And that is a male-dominated industry. And so I think we as women, we have to learn to navigate that. And I think, of course, there's a responsibility of men to learn to navigate reporting to women in a respectful manner. And what does that relationship look like? And for me, I have tried to work through those very awkward situations with whatever humor and grace I can find, and in the support of some really great mentors. But I also had, and I tell people this a lot, the maintenance supervisor that I worked with for the longest time, he was about as hard as they come. Military. And he said to me, and this was pretty early, I had just become a property manager. I had 2 properties. And he said to me, you need to listen to me and to what I tell you about some of these major mechanicals. I'm in high-rise buildings. I work in the city of Chicago, so I'm always dealing in high rises. And so we have major mechanical systems here. And he said, because you are young and because you are a woman, people are going to not take you seriously, and they're going to try to take advantage of the fact that you don't know about the infrastructure of your building. And so really, I want you to learn this so that you do not get taken advantage of. And, we can talk all day about it being an unfair system where he was probably right. But for him to have, had that foresight and to take the time to teach me, and for me to be able to absorb that without being too overly offended. And in the end, I think he probably made one of the greatest impacts on my career to really walk me through the facility side of the building and really teach me the difference between, domestic hot water and the boiler hot water and those types of things that I probably never would have otherwise learned about, and would have always had that dynamic with my maintenance supervisor, that struggle between he knows something that I need to know and he wants to be in charge and I want to be in charge. And so I think I got lucky to have a maintenance manager who invested in me and in helping me learn those things.
And real quick on that, I think kind of the whole point of this that I wanted to touch on is just to really show, again, just the importance. And as you're describing that and getting to know each other's jobs better and being able to respect each other better, it really is just about breaking down those walls in between, because you can go in there and get comfortable taking your coffee from the office, going back to your shop and sitting with your guys and planning out your day and running your own ship from that standpoint, and vice versa on the office side. But I just really encourage everyone to break down those barriers and really try to become, it sounds as corny as it can be, but really to try to become a single unit, and just be two sides of that same coin and just be able to really work, because there's a lot to be gained on both sides. And as I mentioned in the podcast, the Super Bowl of all this is turn, because turn, less patience, more work, less time, higher expectations, all that is going to squeeze out any fake face you can put on or any casual relationship you can have. And you're going to really see people take sides and go in that route. And everyone's eyes are on, again, is the point of this is between the facilities and the office side. So I think the main bottom line I really wanted to push was just to encourage, don't just sit there and think from the maintenance side, don't sit there and think I have a new manager in 18 months, that I'll have to go reconnect with and kind of not retrain, that sounds terrible, but just reacclimate with. And then don't think on the other side, I'm here, I need to kind of show, I sometimes feel like, and I've heard them even say that they think they're kind of supposed to show that they can handle their own. And let's see how you can manage that tough older maintenance guy or something, but really just to stop playing the two sides of that and just to really encourage that cohesion between the two, because that is what I think is missed, because you can't ignore it, but there's so much to be gained if you can get them working together.
And I thought, Lincoln, to that point, when y'all talked in the podcast about the importance of those meetings with your maintenance team or making the time for your maintenance team, I think one of the fallacies that we let ourselves fall into as property managers is this fallacy that we're always too busy for the next thing. And so as a property manager, it is our responsibility. Attitude and environment, they begin at the top down. And so I think it's imperative that we as property managers carve out time for our maintenance team. And for me, that has always worked best for me personally to be the first one in the office, because your maintenance team usually starts before your leasing team. And, or you have somebody, my maintenance supervisors have always worked the early shift. And then, we've had a tech or a porter that is kind of second shift. And so for me to come in the morning and have, that 7:45 to 8:15, 8 to 8:30 time where my maintenance supervisor knows I'm in my office alone, we can share a cup of coffee, we can talk about what's going on. And so really setting those routines that your maintenance supervisor knows you are carving out time for him or her every day. I think it's just important that you are in constant communication with your maintenance team, and that those conversations are not always about what is your maintenance team doing for you or a rundown of here's today's tasks or here's what I need done by Thursday, but that you're communicating with your maintenance supervisor about here's how leasing is going, and we have an investor tour coming up next week, and we're going to be, having a photo shoot for our new ILS listing. And so we're going to really want to make sure the building's looking good for our new pictures. And I think if you are conscious of bringing your maintenance team and supervisor into the fold of what's going on in the property, they start feeling more valued and feeling more part of the team. And those tensions just naturally break down when everybody does feel really comfortable or really on the same team, as opposed to, kind of this one-way street. What can maintenance do for the property? I think the other thing that we have had to, and this is such a struggle for all the property managers out there listening, I know it's a struggle, but I think we sometimes in the office, we overpromise for our maintenance supervisors, absolutely, I'll have him come up and install another shelf in your closet, or, no problem to repaint that wall for you. And I think we sometimes put our maintenance teams in difficult positions by overpromising and really stacking their time without really understanding what they're doing in their time. So I think, as you would say, the same side of that coin is making sure that we do, one day a week, have a leasing consultant working with our maintenance technician, closing out work orders, going with him as he visits apartments for, HVAC filter replacements and seeing what that process looks like. The more we as teams, maintenance team, office team, can see and really understand what's going on the other side of that coin, the more we can help each other, whether that's by shifting responsibility or an encouraging word or, a extra strong coffee in the morning on the last day of turn. You really have to know each other's workload to get to that place.
Yeah. And I think, well, and we can go ahead and get into the interview and kind of do some takeaways on the other side. Actually, let's kind of keep this conversation going. But, when you were saying that, one other thing that, I feel like on the office administrative leasing side of things, there's always a lot of opportunity to celebrate our wins, right? And a lot of that is just because, the literal proximity that we are to each other, during the course of a day. If someone gets a lease, someone, resolves some kind of resident issue, it's easy to high five each other. It's, it's easy to share that amongst everybody and take some pride in what's being done. I think for most general managers, they should, if they're not, having daily or certainly daily meetings with your maintenance staff certainly allows that opportunity for those wins to be shared. And I don't see a lot of people doing that. I see those daily meetings, being more of just a, here's the task list of things that were completed. Here's the number of work orders that came in. Here are the ones that were completed. Here are the ones that, we're waiting on materials. And it's a report to the property manager, which, don't get me wrong, that has to be part of it. But I also think that needs to go both ways. One, I'm shocked at the number of maintenance supervisors I've come across. I'll get basically sent out to a property that's having leasing issues. And, I begin meeting the staff along the way and just kind of really understanding things. And I'll talk with a maintenance supervisor and they're like, oh, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, there's some concerns in regards to, how the property is leasing up this year. And the next thing is, well, how are we leasing up this year? It's like, you don't know? that needs to be, I'm not saying that they even need to know that on a daily basis, but they certainly need to know on a weekly basis how things are going with the leasing season, because there's a lot of things there that, from a communication standpoint, that the maintenance team is able to push along to, information to the residents about renewing. There's also, information that the maintenance team can give back to the maintenance, or to the general manager or the property manager about things they're hearing that, could be improved or where the staff has fallen short on making residents feel like, they want to renew, they want to refer their friends, right? So, there's, again, that two-way street there that it's not just the act of meeting, but you've got to think about that. You've got to think about the content of those meetings and are you celebrating wins? So anything else you guys, want to bring up before we hit play on this?
No. Yeah, no, not really.
Let's hear it.
All right, great.
I'd like to welcome Corey to the show. Corey, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Happy to have you on here. A little background about Corey and myself. We worked with two different companies actually for various lengths of time. I'll just leave it at that. Over a span of a few years, we worked in student housing together. I was on the facility side, and Corey was in various kind of operations and GM statuses. We worked together at an off-campus housing as well as with a P3 project at a big university in the state of Kentucky. We worked there together for a few years, so we got to know each other very well. And today's topic we're going to be hitting on is just going to be about kind of in general the importance of the relationship between a property manager and a facilities manager, and how it can have a very great impact if you have a solid relationship, and how it can obviously have the downside of causing a lot of issues, a lot of resentment, people not being happy with their work status during that time. So, Corey, why don't you give them a little background into what you've done in student housing?
Well, I started way back while I was in college, took a kind of a front desk role part-time just to make a little bit more money while I was in school, and then progressed to the point that at the ripe old age of 21, I was promoted to the general manager of that property. From then on, I moved around through a couple different companies, up to, leasing manager, assistant manager, a GM, then jumped over to the on-campus side and was a assistant director of operations for a while for 5,000 plus beds, and then was there for a couple years, and then jumped back into the private side as a property manager, and now currently actually work in operations for a turn vendor. So I've kind of seen all aspects of the housing industry.
Yeah, and so if that sounds familiar to my background, it's because it is actually. We kind of had a lot of the same things. Of course, mine was coming out of the military and getting into student housing, but I worked for various parts of the student housing realm, and then actually ended up also too having a stint as a vendor for student housing for turn vendor, throughout the year vendor as a general manager in that facet. So yeah, both of us kind of have every perspective of it, and that's probably why we work so well together. So I guess I'm going to start off with talking about situations where maybe I didn't work as well with somebody, and obviously I'm going to go into one and see if maybe Corey has any of them as well. And I'm sure some of you all listening have had some stories or have something that hops to mind or pops into your mind when you think about a property manager, facility manager relationship that didn't go so well. So I'm just going to kind of touch on one, and I will start by saying I was very blessed to have pretty awesome property managers and just kind of collateral manager positions, period. Even when I was on the larger scale, I always got to work with some pretty great people. So, but I have had a situation where I was stuck with somebody who was the property manager, GM. I can't remember what that company used, one of those two, at a property off campus one. And I don't know maybe where this individual was starting off, and maybe it was the environment. We're going to kind of talk about that some here in a little bit, but just kind of the environment that's set when you learn about student housing. I feel like that kind of climate and culture is a learned thing. So I will say I don't know the background that this individual had. I guess I can say she and stay with that, but that she had, but she kind of already had a resentment towards maintenance and kind of a nose up approach towards maintenance. And that was kind of different for me, like I said, because I had been working previous to that with some great ones that really kind of respected. And obviously it's a lot about mutual respect, but we had some incidences where definitely there were some times I was thrown under the bus. And I'm sure all of us, again, have those stories where I was thrown under the bus just from being on the maintenance side, where she wanted to wipe her hands of any situation or any hostile parents that come in or hostile residents that came in. So I had gone through that, and it really did help me appreciate the good relationships that I did have. And it made me look at everything as being more grateful from that point moving forward. It really causes an issue. And one of the main things we're going to talk about today is just the mentality of those two teams. It almost kind of becomes an office versus a maintenance kind of team versus team mentality, gang versus gang, however you want to look at it. And to some of you might say, wow, I never experienced that. And that's awesome if you haven't experienced that, but it is something that's out there. And really the whole point of this podcast is to really just help people focus and maybe recalibrate their relationship, or maybe just look at it differently to see that you working with your property manager, facilities manager, and having that relationship be kind of the pinnacle of the property. Some people will say that's like a marriage, right? So you just to have those two together, and it's kind of dad and mom on each side, or dad and dad, whatever it ends up being. But with having that relationship, it really sets the tone for everybody else. If you go in and you ignore your property manager and have an issue with them, then your guys are going to see you do that. They're going to disrespect them. Then they're going to, subconsciously also disrespect the office staff in general. And when you start getting that separation, when it really is a team effort, that causes a lot of issues. So, Corey, do you have any instances where you've had not maybe the happiest environment at a workplace?
Absolutely. Having jumped into a property manager role at a location not in this state, came into a maintenance manager that was an older gentleman, and just one of those guys that he just had a very toxic relationship with pretty much everybody. One of the things that he did that was one of my hardest issues to overcome was he had a general disdain for the residents. He was one of those guys that constantly thought that students were breaking things on purpose just to give him more work, and just had a general negative view of the students. And the problem with that, in addition to his attitude when he's in there, is that it rubbed off on the staff. And I could tell that, even our office staff would, when a resident would come in, they would, be cordial and helpful. And when they'd leave, they would just turn around and start degrading that, that particular resident. And it happened all the time. And I think it was, a byproduct of the maintenance manager and his attitude. So, the first thing that I tried to nip in the bud was to work with him, but even quicker was to work with our office staff and just try and change that attitude around, because you could even see it in our reviews. It wasn't a secret that our staff didn't have the best rapport with the residents. And it was one of those things that we had to quickly turn around. And while it was, a little bit easier with the student staff, especially because I was in the office most of the time, it did take a while with him to try and turn that view around on the residents. And then the other issue he had is when, obviously when you're continuously negative, he was very negative towards his employees and would constantly berate them and would yell out in public, in view of the residents. And, when you see that as a resident, you just think that, if this particular staff hates each other and doesn't like their job, and it just kind of brings down the whole aura of the property. So we really had to work one-on-one on trying to change his view, and, the old mantra of, them breaking things is job security for you. So, I know you don't always like going in there and fixing things, but it is, if they didn't break it, we might not need you. So just trying to
exactly. That's job security right there.
Yeah, just trying to interject positivity into him, and when he's smiling, everybody, his staff is smiling, and we eventually got around to that. It did take a lot of one-on-one interactions with him just to kind of show him the positive side of these issues. But it is very toxic. Just not one. It's amazing how one person can change the entire view of a property.
Yeah, definitely. So like when you were saying that, it was just kind of making me think about it. You were saying you were younger in that situation. He was kind of older in that situation. And when I talk about the relationship, I really think a lot of that has to do with getting on the same page, right? So kind of understanding that you guys have a shared accountability for the property. And I kind of think about this a lot, but obviously that wasn't your view on the property. That was his view on the property. So that's where it gets kind of tough. Like, how do we break this bread? How do we get together? How am I going to tell this guy who's been in here, 10, 15 years longer than me? How do you do that? And I think it just has to come from a mutual respect. And I think it has to be just kind of, like you were saying, just kind of bring it up in small dialogue, trying to get one-on-one with him, try to sit down and just say, you want this property to go well? I want this property to go well. We want this to run smoothly, and then to find out how we can do this. Because there's going to be different personality types. There's no doubt about it. It's almost guaranteed, especially because those are two different life skill sets, two different personalities that do those positions anyways. It makes it really tough for that to happen. So one thing that I've done in situations where I've gone in with new workers is really to just kind of go in there and sit down and kind of let them talk and kind of let them know what their expectation is of you. Because I feel like a simple role like that really does kind of get ignored. And I think that would be such kind of a rare thing. And it really kind of, again, if he would have sat down and say, what do you expect from me? Even if he's thinking, here's this young guy coming in here, what do you expect from me? That's a great opportunity for you to hop in there and say, I want to do well at this job. I'm in a big position right now, based on my, my age and everything. This is really important to me. I want to make this a career. I want to be successful here. And, obviously to do that, you have to run an effective property. So just to try to at least voice that to him. And if it needs to get brought up other ways, you can do that. But at least you have to go in there and be open-minded and say, what can I do? Can we get on the same page here? Another thing too, I thought about when you were saying that is setting the tone. So in student housing, whether you're a porter that's one day going to be a tech, that maybe one day be a lead tech, and one day be a property or a facilities manager, that's kind of how that chain goes. On the other side, you can have a part-time leasing agent. who could then go to become a leasing agent, to become a AGM or something, and then a GM. So all that to say, there's these levels that they want to move up. And I feel like setting the example is so important, because you're not just worried about your career when you're in that position. Literally everybody else underneath you is watching you to see how you react with other people and how you do your job in general. I always made sure I was extra hard on myself if I ever walked through a property with one of my maintenance guys, or even if I was walking a office staff over somewhere or whatever it was, to make sure I was bending down and picking up every cigarette I saw, every can I saw. Because again, if they see you walk by that can, they see you walk by that cigarette butt, they see you walk by that resident that's violating something, or, that gives you opportunity to interact properly with a resident, you can really set that tone to make them feel like, oh man, I'm not doing what he just did. Maybe I should be doing that. Because again, we get their shared responsibility of being kind of that pinnacle position that they could go within that company or within, student housing. So I really think that part is really big.
Absolutely. And part of the setting the tone thing, like you were speaking on, was when we were up there together. One of the things, you tell him your expectations, but you also want to tell him that I feel very important in trying to advance my career, but I also want you to see you have the opportunity to advance your career. And one way to do that is we have to be on the same page. We have to work together more than you would think. And with talking with that particular maintenance manager, one of the things that I think previous manager had kind of not done with him was show him the why in what we're doing, and not just give him tasks. And so one of the things I would do is I would bring him in on budget meetings. I would bring him in on, pre-turn meetings and things like that, because I want him to know from the very beginning, not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it. So if something does arise that we weren't expecting and I'm not around, he knows the full overall plan and he can take responsibility for it. I think that some of his disdain with the residents and the property was that he thought he was just coming in 9 to 5 to change light bulbs and fix toilets and leave. And that's not what the facilities manager is so important and vital, and arguably more important in the terms of renewals for the property than the office staff. Because once that resident's in there, 9 times out of 10, they're going to see the maintenance staff more than they're going to see the office staff. So, just kind of showing him that with just a change of attitude and some smiles, and the next year we come in and we've renewed at 15% more, I want him to see that. I want him to be a part of the team from the beginning to the end, and not just feel like somebody that's in there to fill a place.
And yeah, so that brings me to my next point. If you happen to be in a situation in the office where you're a little slower, you don't have as much going on, everything's filed, everyone's been followed up with, and you have work orders still going on. I always, kind of found this early on, and I won't say I invented it, but I definitely utilized it. But I definitely had some of my office staff go around with my maintenance men as they went into rooms and did some of the more basic, especially work orders. Again, this is only if you can afford it in the office to be down one at a time or so, or have them rotate. I think that's really important to have them through. It really kind of helps them, empathize and understand the process to do some of these work orders. Also, it can really kind of help them maybe have some generic troubleshooting that will be even more so valuable during the turn time. But if they can go around with them and see how they interact with them, and just kind of see how that whole process goes, it really does help them out on the phones whenever they get phone calls about different issues. So I really do think that's a really, really big point too, to just let them go out there, let them see what it's like, let them see how long it is. One of my biggest things I always kind of beg to my property managers is to just please have your staff not give exact times that things will be done. Just as much as you can, stay away from that. Be able to say things like, we're going to get to it as soon as we can on the list, or something like that. If you start giving dates, you hang yourself by those dates, and it can really, really start to mess with you and your guys, especially when it's an unattainable date that you have on there. So that's one of my things I always say, please try to have them use words like as soon as possible, or right when we get to it, or, say something like that. And then of course it's all about having a good follow-up portion on there. But on the flip side too, I think it's important that maintenance guys walk with some of the staff to go do like a tour of the property. And of course that's on the other side to make sure that they know where they're going to see for grounds. Not that all grounds shouldn't be perfect, but if you're going to start an area, they always say walk the tour route. Well, let's see how you guys walk the tour route. Let's see what things you point out inside the model. Maybe there's something visibly broken that we can go and fix that maybe you guys wouldn't catch, but it's nice to go in there and see. So there's a lot of that kind of cross training. I don't know if you did that with any of your stuff, Corey, or kind of encourage your guys just to at least have the mentality of not trying to be disadvantageous to your maintenance crew.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that, and actually working with you is one of the places that we really excelled on this from the office side was we would really harp on some of our community assistants and even our leasing manager to be able to maybe do some of the smaller maintenance tasks. The big one I know in working with you, and we carried it on even when you and I didn't work together, was having our staff be able to handle some of the lock issues, some of the physical lock issues at the doors, whether it was maybe, with electronic locks, you're jumping batteries, you're changing batteries, things like that, because we didn't want to pull you off of something that may be more important when we can handle it as far as a lock. But two, the flip side of that too is the timing for the resident. If they are locked out and they need their lock jumped, if they call, our community assistant and they're able to go do it right away, it saves them calling the community assistant calling, the maintenance manager or the tech, who then has to go to the shop, leave what they're doing, go to the shop, get the jump set, get some batteries, get a screwdriver, then head to that could be 10, 15 minutes when if you are caught up on things, or even if it's a 5-10 minute run for the CA where the assistant manager or GM can cover the office, that makes all the difference to the resident. Plus the maintenance staff sees that we're not afraid to get in there and do some of the tasks that we ask you to do. It's always big, as a property manager. One of the things I always made sure my staff saw me doing was cleaning toilets during turn, because if I'm willing to get elbow deep in it, I know that you're seeing that, and it makes it easier for you to jump into those same kind of tasks.
Yeah, and I'll say on that too, on the maintenance side, this is kind of getting away from our whole thing of the relationship part where I'm about to take it. But something I did learn in the military, I was in the military for 10 years, and I actually worked a group called the CBs. We were a civil engineer corps. And one thing I'll never forget learning from one of my chiefs while I was in was any kind of new tool, any kind of tough looking or any kind of situation where it maybe looked a little dangerous or could be a little worrisome, he always made sure that he did the first reps on that thing. So that's still the same kind of deal on the maintenance side of that, but it did remind me of that. I think it's a good lesson to keep carrying over. But if you're going to have your guys go out there and use some kind of tool that you don't even think you would use, and you're in a maintenance manager position, you better get out there and do it. I think on the same side too, you can probably agree with me here on the property management side. If you want to show how to do some cold calling or show how to do a follow-up call or show whatever it is, you have them come around you hop on there, you kind of need to be that, that example to set for them to show, like, you don't need to be scared here. You don't need to do this. So I think something like that, is really important. And that goes back to kind of setting the pace and, just any opportunity you have to teach and to show them the proper way to do something. Again, it all builds that culture in their mind, and whenever position they have in the future, it will affect them to see how they see the other side of that.
Absolutely. And one of the things, like touching back on to not setting a specific time and date, it's good that the maintenance team knows that, while, everything is labeled by importance based on the repair that's needed, it's important that they know the same verbiage so that when they get up there, it hasn't been promised that we're 20 minutes late or that we're a day late. They need to know, it's always good for the office staff to let the maintenance crew know what kind of environment they were going in there, because we always want to be prepared if it is a resident that's upset. We want to make sure that we, and you were one of the best at this, are able just to kind of talk them down, kind of help them relax a little bit, and just through kind of being personable and chatting with them, they, that's some of those things that lead to that resident, being comfortable saying, hey, I had something else break. Can Lincoln come up, or can, so-and-so maintenance tech come up? Once they have that personal relationship with them, they kind of feel tied to the property. And when the resident feels tied to the property, that's great, because that has them signing renewals. So
absolutely. That's such an important part. Just, again, the familiarization with your property. Of course, it makes owners. Earlier, when you were talking about how, as he mentioned, we had a previous property where we started kind of encouraging that, and it wasn't really to be lazy on the maintenance side or anything. It really was about customer service, and I'm sure the owners would be happy about it too. But if we have office staff inside there, 2 or 3 people there in the evening, and they have that kind of time, that kind of response that shows that they can hop in there. Whereas my guys, I think, again, Corey can definitely agree to this, I'm sure, but usually if someone's living on site, it's from the leasing side, and more rarely on the maintenance side. So if someone has to get in the car and drive back out to that property and do the whole steps like you said versus the other, you're easily, like you said, talking about a 15, 20, 30-minute difference on getting them inside their room. And every minute they're in that hallway waiting for that person who, and sorry, I'll break there to say, make sure to give realistic expectation of what time they're going to be there too. People always like to say like I'm on my way or something, and maybe it's the military in me again, but when I say something, I'll say I'm looking at this building right now. Like we have a road here next thing called New Circle. I'll say I'm looking at this building or this intersection, because you really don't gain anything from that. You gain more with the truth. So I only say that because I've had people tell me, oh yeah, they said a maintenance guy, would be right up, or he should be up there in 5 to 10 minutes, without really having a good gauge for that. So even if you have to just say they'll be up there, I'll give you an updated time of when it'll be sooner or something like that. I really think that's far more important to actually give them that. Because again, every minute that resident is sitting with their back against the wall of that hallway and no one's there to let them in that door, they're getting furious and they might be on that phone writing a review when you turn the corner. So make sure your guys show up with a smile on their face and have that part going. But I think it's important to give a realistic time frame for things like that.
Yeah, and all that's tied back to the relationship between the office staff and the maintenance team, because if the office staff can take care of it, great. If not, when the office staff calls the maintenance team, if they're not on a good relationship terms, they're just going to say, "Hey, 228's locked out." Or if they really are on a good spot with them, they can give them more details. 228's locked out. She said this is the second time in 2 days. We may want to chat to her about ways that they can, maybe prolong the battery life if she's, hitting the lock 4 or 5 times when she's unlocking it, or things like that. But any information that the office staff can provide above and beyond is beneficial to the property entirely. But that all depends on the relationship between the maintenance team and the staff, and them not being afraid to talk to each other and help each other out.
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess we're going to hop into next, just kind of, we're going around about how it can be beneficial, how it can be horrible, telling these stories and whatnot. But I want to kind of get into how we can make this process better. So I'm going to kind of go on this. For example, one of them with Corey that I worked with him on, I was going to bring up first, is having meetings together. It doesn't necessarily have to be every week, not even every 2 weeks, but, probably nice about every 2 weeks or so, but to really get all of them together and to look at each other and to see each other, know each other's name. Definitely have each other's number. I think, as much as they want each other to have each other's numbers, it can be extra beneficial unless you have a great radio system going on at your site or something. But just to have all of them at least be able to know that's, this is Rachel, this is Dan, this is Margaret, I mean, even more so, even if, and I think as the maintenance manager, you should know this is Dan. He's going to go, he wants to get into PR. This is Margaret. She wants to be an accountant. I think at least from the manager level to really kind of get to know that. And on the flip side too, the property manager should know if a maintenance guy's, if he's only doing maintenance until he finishes up his, civil engineer degree, then he's off to other things, or he wants to move up within the company. I really think that part too is really important to know your own people. And I think everywhere I worked, not just because maybe I have a pretty big mouth, but I feel like I had my own relationship with each individual, from the office side, from obviously my staff, and then from the office side. And even to the point where I still talk to quite a few people that I worked with in the past that were on the office side. So I really think encouraging that. And of course, again, that starts with letting everyone see each other. But then on the level of the property manager and the facilities manager, definitely, if I understand some people are really busy, they come in. Sometimes the facility guy comes in first, the property person comes in later because they might stay till 6. You might leave at 5. Whatever all that is, find a time that you can at least talk. Obviously, you should be talking on the phone daily, and seeing each other probably even daily. But having an actual dedicated time at least once a week to sit down, maybe even a Monday and a Friday combo, to just say, what's on your mind? What's going on? When we talked earlier about kind of sharing the same responsibility and accountability for a site, and kind of trying to even impress your beliefs and your outlook on it to somebody else, it can be done through this time. So you set aside time. It doesn't have to be lunch. It'd be great if it was lunch. But you know what happens when you take the property manager and the facilities manager off site at one time. Sometimes the worlds collide. But definitely to set aside time. It really is just about like any relationship. You have to have designated time. So I don't know if I'm trying to say this is the translation to a week date or whatnot, but just have that time set up, sit down, let each other talk. Maybe don't have a hardcore agenda on it. Leave some time for just some, even letting yourselves complain to each other about, not maybe about each other. That's not that productive, but just about things. Let yourself just complain about things to each other. And I think having that aspect, and again, seeing you all get along is huge for them. But definitely the once a week or so, or once every 2 weeks of getting everyone together. Do you have any other thoughts on how to definitely build that relationship there, Cole?
Absolutely. So as far as the staff getting together, one of the things that we like to do is anytime we were having a resident event, and typically those are once a week, midterms that may be longer, but anytime we had a resident event, we would invite our maintenance staff to that event. And one of the things that we would always do is if, we were having lunch or we were having something, we would make sure that the maintenance staff knew that we were having lunch that day and they could come join. And, you're buying that food anyway for your event. So it's not like it's an extra hit to your budget, but you're also bringing them up to see the residents and see your staff that's working the event, and if you're having a taco bar or you're grilling out or whatnot, we always encourage our maintenance staff to be a part of that. And, it was a quote unquote free lunch that we could provide to them. And as far as, meeting with your maintenance manager, one of my rules always was, and this, some may see this as overkill, but I always wanted to end the day with a meeting between me and my maintenance manager, just to go over the events of the day. What'd you see on these work orders? How are the hallways looking in building 1? But then also to kind of get a quick plan for the next morning. Hey, since we're done, these work orders have come in, or hey, I've got a shipment coming in of parts that you had ordered. But just so we're always on the same plan. I don't expect him to come up in the morning because we're diving into work orders and we're doing grounds and things like that. And I don't want to pull him away from that. But as he's finishing up his day, we'd always have a 10, 15 minute meeting just to where we could get on the same page from that day and for the next day. And then the one on Friday, I would tend to, we'd talk a little bit, but I'd try and extend it a little bit of time just to build that personal relationship. Hey, how was your week? Are we doing anything exciting for the weekend? Things like that. But just set aside some time to make sure that, they were happy and or looking happy. And, just so we were always on the same page day in, day out. But I don't see that as overkill because, the facilities manager is a critical part of the property. So as a property manager, you're always wanting to trust but verify. So I trust that he was getting, all of these done, but the verify side of it was talking with him, checking up and just making sure that what our goals were at the beginning of the week were accomplished by the end of the week.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we always shot for in that case too. And again, it can be seen as a luxury to be able to have that kind of time or something set up. But if you're not meeting it all right now, I suggest at least starting that, and maybe that can be a great end goal to get to that point because you're never really going to hurt from too much communication. It can really only stand to benefit you and your property as that process goes on. So we kind of went over some of the issues that can happen, and we try to, of course, offer up some wisdom, whatever wisdom we could muster, just as far as how to get that on a better page. But definitely, I think one thing I would say, we mentioned earlier, kind of at the beginning of the day gets busy, you kind of offset hours a little bit. I feel like you can last maybe 3 or 4 months without really having to without being able to have a really, really genuine, great relationship. And I'm sure you can maybe get by. But next point I want to bring up, which of course is one of my babies, is a point where you can't hide it. You can't hide if you don't have a good relationship. And that is absolutely turn. So this is kind of the Super Bowl of the relationship of that area. So throughout the year, you have things, it all kicks off kind of with move-in day, which is still, it's hard to decide if that counts as the year or the tail end of turn. But this is a time where if you have any issues or you have to hold it in, you're a little upset, you don't really bring it out, turn will bring that out. So if you don't have a good situation, a good relationship, it will be exposed at turn, and your guys will see it at turn, and everyone kind of sees the worst version or a magnified version of that person at turn time. So I will definitely say that if you're going to start, this is a good time right now. As we talk right now, kind of, beginning first quarter of the year, get in there. If you don't have a great one, say, let's have a great one. Go in there with an open mind. Start trying to work on that relationship. You don't have to be upset. And obviously this leads to so much more we didn't even really touch on, but turnover. And even if you don't have crazy turnover, you're going to have bitter people. So these are all things you're trying to avoid because it all shows through to your customers. You don't want to have to keep retraining. You don't want to keep having that guy that has a snarl on his face the entire time, or kind of gives like a rolls his eyes at the staff or something. But turn is so essential. Like we said, all this stuff that we're talking about, all of it will be, just absolutely tested to the max during turn time. If you don't have that good communication of expectation, I'll tell another quick story. Actually kind of with the same individual before, but our expectations of rooms being done, usually I feel like, property managers feel like the maintenance ones are not high enough. But in this case, it was kind of backwards. I kind of wanted a higher expectation in some of these rooms, and we'd go around and have issues with vendors, and they'd say, oh, well, they said that this was good. This is all, they didn't have any problem with it. Why do you have a problem with it? And so that's the kind of stuff that goes through, because not only with vendors, that's going to be your own staff. What's a good trash out? How much is too much trash to leave for your cleaners? All those types of things. Or how should a room look? Or should it be mopped out of the front door or footprint or any of that standard stuff you have? Again, it should really ramp up. It should like almost crescendo to your turn time to make sure that relationship is on point and that you guys are on the exact same page moving into there. But yeah, Corey, I just talking on the point of turn and kind of how it's important to be on the same page, and really we kind of lean on each other in that. But do you have anything to speak to in that?
Absolutely, and I think the main thing in you and I think we're kind of thrown into a unique situation when we were on campus, and that it was the company we worked for his first year on campus, and we had never planned a turn, and then about 3 months prior to the turn, we were hit with, oh, by the way, we have $1 million conference schedule that's moving in and out intermittently for the next 3 months. So I think, what you and I did, and it doesn't have to be a situation that big or that crazy, but just on your general turn, the first thing you got to do is 99% of your turn meetings, whether you're a GM or a property or a maintenance manager, is you got to do them together. You guys got to be on the same page from the very beginning. And, that kind of harkens back to what I was talking about with, don't just show your facilities manager what you're doing, show them why you're doing it. And, this is why we're starting in these rooms. This is why, this is why we're doing this or doing that. And it's because I want them to see the strategy of it. And also you can show them how you're going to bat for them. You can show them that, our last walkthrough, we found a bunch of stuff that was broken. We want to try and get that stuff fixed. So when turn comes, you're not spending your time on something you could have fixed. Or, hey, I just want to let you know that our office staff is avoiding the dreaded transfer on a transfer on a transfer as much as possible, because I know how that really strains you. But to involve that facilities team in there as much as you can with the planning of your turn makes them, again, feel like they're responsible for the property and they're not just here, 9 to 5 in turn 9 to 9, I guess, just to get the job done. But, and another thing that we would always do is when we would start our walkthroughs, the very beginning of turn, we want everybody to be on the same page. So when we would do our walkthroughs, we would always match an office staff with a maintenance technician. And we would walk, because that very first day, you get your early move outs, whatnot. There's not much you can do until the rooms are vacant. We wanted them to be together, A, to build that relationship, and B, so you have a pair of eyes from the maintenance team and a pair of eyes from the office on all the items in the rooms. So, a maintenance person may see something that's broken that an office person didn't realize. So that's always helpful. But again, it's building those relationships, because you're down in the trenches, and it's deflating for a maintenance team to be out there and look over and see an office staff, playing solitaire on their computer, while the maintenance staff knows they're putting in a 9-10 hour day today. So we always made put those expectations that we're going to do this. It's going to take as long as it takes, but we're going to do it together. Yeah,
definitely. Like I said, again, this is another time magnified, on steroids, to set a good example for your guys. Keep digging in, be gracious. Everyone needs a little extra patience, because again, it's just, it's almost like a supernatural thing to be able to go through turn. And, I tell people this, but when you ask people on the outside, hey, no big deal. We have, 1,000 beds that we're going to clean out, maintenance, paint, trash, carpet clean. We have to schedule all that out and get it ready, for residents in 14 days. It sounds insane, and most of us do it in around 9 or 10 and have the extra time that we need to make sure that sparkle's there. But it really sounds impossible. So we work in the realm of impossibility, I feel like, anyways. And so definitely you're going to be stretched out. If you're the first one to crack, your guys will follow. I can guarantee you that. If you're the first one to start running your mouth and complaining about the office, they're going to follow. They're going to carry that. They're going to feel justified in it because you did it, because they're tired. But we're still judged off decisions we make when we're tired. Unfortunately, in life, it doesn't matter. The law doesn't care if you're tired or not, if you're worn out or not, or if it's impossible or not. You're still held to your actions. So you really have to make sure that you're, keeping that up. And again, this is all part of keeping this relationship, which is what we wanted to talk on today. So I first want to just definitely thank Corey for hopping on here with me. He's a busy guy. He does a lot, but I obviously have Corey on here because he's one of my favorite people I ever got to work with. So much so I followed him obviously to another property at a point, but it's been great. And you just don't want to look back at your career and think about all the negative work relationships or whatnot that you have, and know maybe you could have done something about it, or or, maybe been a little less prideful or something and worked on them. Sometimes tough situations are tough situations, but definitely just want to definitely thank him for carving out some time and making the planets align so our schedules would work out so we can hop on here. So definitely appreciate you coming by, Corey.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast. And if you ever do one where we just tell stories the whole time, I'm all the way in.
So I'm sure we could fill plenty of that. We could have our own weekly series on that one. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone for listening on this, and definitely hope that it showed you something, or at least you could relate with something in this, and hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you for having us.
Well, there you have it. Lincoln, again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, but also bringing in Corey, not just because you guys have got, that prior work relationship, but Corey just gets it,
Definitely. Corey is a rock star. He really is in his own right for sure. And he's gotten to shine on a lot of different stages. So I was really happy to get him to get out here and get his input on it, because he's someone that definitely, as you said, gets it. He really understands it, and great to work with. So I really appreciate Corey coming on.
Yeah. Well, and we all talked about this a little bit before, but I think the main thing that comes out of this is, it's all about, it's not about, we talked earlier about a lot of the differences, between the male and female dynamic that plagues these two different teams, or is the a lot of times the additional pressure, on these two teams of the property staff. But, regardless of gender or age or anything else, this is really about leadership. These two positions are so, if you guys are not on the same page, if you guys are not wanting to do these things that Lincoln and Jackie have pointed, that we've all pointed out, during this conversation, there's a leadership issue there. And I get it. I mean, there were days where I would wake up out of bed completely dreading having to do a task that was part of, not just, it's because I didn't want to have a specific discussion with somebody about it. And, there became a gut check of, okay, am I really ready to lead this team? And do I have the other people in place that can lead their components of the team? Not just their components, but, that can co-lead with me, as a general manager. And I think at the end of the day, that's just it. And, if you've listened to this and you're like, there's parts of that I completely get, but God, I could never see myself giving up, an office staff member to, go help the maintenance guys or shadow the maintenance team on something. If there's that issue, either because of time or because you feel like there's going to be some kind of bad influence, you've got a leadership issue either with yourself or with the person that is in that other position. And you got to figure that one out really quick, because it's not going to end well if you don't.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also think making sure your maintenance supervisor is in a position that they're, not just willing, but excited about the opportunity of taking a leasing consultant out onto the property with them, excited about the opportunity to show your AM how they're, how to change a filter or where the water shutoff valve is. And, that, as you say, co-leader who's willing to share their expertise with the management team as well.
And as we're talking about setting an example in this case, I think it's definitely fair to think that if a property manager has some time, that she could go do a grounds walk or other types of walks in there again, so that they can see that going on. It's very beneficial, again, to all parts. If they can see that, oh, wow, she's even going to go walk with him and see this stuff. The more you can learn in that field, as Jackie spoke on earlier, it's just the better. So if you start off with that, and then as you have some slow time, we're not saying stop in the middle of leasing season, but if you have some downtime, which does exist, and your model's looking pretty good and your office is looking pretty good, send one of them with it, because it really is only beneficial, and it helps a lot in that case.
Yeah. Throughout this episode, we've talked a lot about both tactical things that you can do as well as, kind of general mindset things that you need to have. And hopefully everybody took great notes. On top of that, we've also put together a PDF of things that both you and your other leadership cohorts, I guess is the best way to put it. So regardless if you're a maintenance supervisor or if you're a general manager or if you're in some other type of leadership role with site staff, we put all these bullet points down so that you've got something practical that you can keep in your desk drawer, that you can keep posted in your maintenance shop or whatever to remind you of these things. So if you want that, just send an email to contact@studenthousinginsight.com. Again, that's contact@studenthousinginsight.com. And in the title, just put "Send me the Harmony checklist," and we'll send that over to you. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for the time putting this podcast together. I think there's a lot that people could take away from it. Are either of you guys going to, we've got Interface coming up, or either of you guys going to that?
We are a maybe for Interface. We're going to try to get out there. We're trying to make sure the schedules work because we have some of our development stuff going on. But
yeah. And if obviously we don't have time for it today, Lincoln, but we've got to do something pretty soon to really dive into Easy Turn and what you guys are doing to help folks make Turn so much better. And if you're interested in doing that now, go to easyturn.net and you can find more about Lincoln's company and what they're doing there. But it's an awesome app that if you haven't seen it, I can't wait for you to see it. And Jackie, are you doing any other conferences here in the next little bit?
I am hoping to attend. BizNow does an annual Chicago Student Housing Summit, and I'm hoping to be presenting at that in a couple weeks here. But I will not be at Interface. But I'll be carefully monitoring to make sure they've got a good, high quality supply of female presenters this year. That's when my hot button topics every year.
Well, I will tell you. I'll tell you, we are, just so everybody knows, I will be at Interface. I'm also going to be at the first ever annual Canadian Student Housing Conference in Toronto next week, probably about the same time, probably shortly after. Well, it's next week. This podcast will come out this week, and that's next week in Toronto. Being at Interface the next week. And last year we did we recorded the site level to C-suite episode. And that was great. It's been our highest downloaded. We're doing one this year it's called Beyond Borders. And it's focusing in on really 4 key U.S. operators that are either have or are in the process of expanding their operations beyond the U.S. and are going international with what they're doing. And, 2 of the 4 of those companies are female. So it's, you and I had that discussion before. It's, I read an interesting article that Drew Armstrong from, she's the CEO of Grace Hill. She recently posted on LinkedIn, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it was from the former CEO of PepsiCo, who's an Indian woman. And she really started talking about she said, one of the biggest issues with, and, you're talking more Fortune 500 type of companies, but it was really talking about, there's a leaky pipeline. When you look at where people are, regardless of what gender, where people are in their career path, by the time they get to certainly to kind of a 3rd tier management level, that's right at the same time when women are thinking about having kids and what that's going to look like. And, certainly she wasn't suggesting that women stop having kids and put all that away, but for companies to really kind of think about that's kind of that's the process that we all go through as human beings. And the comment that I know that you've received in the past, Jackie, was that, well, there's just not a lot of men or a lot of women that are in, that,
yes.
That are in those positions. And to a point, I agree with that. To a point, I think it's many more now than what there's ever been in the past, specifically in the student housing industry.
Definitely.
But man, we've got some amazing women that are in, executive level positions. We've had, just on this show, Susan Falcomer with Price Company, Price, with Donna Price, leading up that company. It's just, amazing there. I've had a lot of discussions recently with Beth Pender at CA Ventures and Jennifer Beese at ACC. I mean, it's just, there are some truly amazing women that are in this industry, and I'm hearing from them. I don't know that what I've been somewhat disappointed from are folks that are more in that, a lot of both women and men that are at that site level and regional manager level that aren't getting heard, and that's, and that's part of what we're trying to do with Student Housing Insight and the summits, is because those ideas and the things that those folks want to talk about, I think can evolve this industry much more than, what I see happening at some of these other national conferences.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about what y'all are doing. And so I will not be at Interface, but I will be watching. And I think if, we could do a whole podcast, I think, on women to watch. But I personally am really looking forward to the dynamic of Taylor Gunn and MJ Ziering, both of whom recently have gone to CA Ventures. Yeah. And I think just really highly of both of those. I've worked with MJ on a couple of transactions, and Taylor, I know just from a couple of industry things. Most notably, we talked a bit at the Charlotte Summit last year. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I give CA Ventures real credit. They've got a lot of leadership at the top. And of course, I'd be remiss to not point out that so does Peak Campus have an incredible amount of female leadership as well. But I do agree, it's that mid-level female voice that is not often heard. And so I, as you know, I'm super passionate about the work you're doing and appreciate the many opportunities you've given me to speak on behalf of my fellow women out here in the field every day.
Well, it's not really just because you're a woman. It's because you bring such of a, just a unique insight and thoughtful insight into things. And I enjoy the conversation, gender aside. I don't get me wrong. I do bring you in for a gender perspective because it's important, but more than anything, you're just a super thoughtful person, and Peak is very lucky to have you. So, well, thank you.
And when you do your Easy Turn podcast, let me know, because View 53 is all in with Lincoln and Chase this year. So we're gearing up to do our first Easy Turn turnover, and I can't wait to let you know how great it goes.
Awesome. Well, guys,
we're excited to have you.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks again.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Good to talk to you both again.
Take care. See you all. Hey guys, don't forget, call Leap Insurance today. Contact them at leapeasy.com.